Welcome to PWE Music. I'm Dr. Patrick Engler, and today we have the final installment in our Clarinet Masterclass for the 2023 TMEA All-State auditions for soprano clarinet, and we'll be talking about the third selection, Etude number 35, this time from the Rose 40 Etudes. And as always, with TMEA, we'll be talking about the David Height edition. So let's jump into this etude. And this one's got some technique to it. It's also got a little bit more meat on the bones, expressive-wise, lyrically, than, say, like the first selection. So the big thing with this one, big thing I'm going to say with all technical etudes, is you don't want to go too fast. It's easy to pick a tempo that's a little bit too fast when you're in the easy stuff, and then once you get into something that's a little too difficult to do with the tempo you chose, you find yourself in the weeds, and that's where mistakes happen. You want to practice. When you're practicing, you want to start with a tempo that you can achieve everything without mistakes, and your final goal tempo should be something where you can play everything nice and clear, don't need to worry about pushing your fingers too hard, be conservative. Once the adrenaline gets going, you'll get that extra 5 to 10% of tempo that you might want from the get-go. So, don't go too fast, be conservative, be reasonable, everything should be nice and clear. On that note, we have a little bit more articulation in this one. We have some extended 16th note passages, we have some different articulation patterns. Because it is a little bit faster, we want to remember what we want to do with articulation when we get faster, is we want to keep it light. So I know there's staccatos, I know there are accents in here, but we don't want to be hitting those like we're trying to punch someone out. We want to stay nice and light and bouncy and keep it moving forward. If we get too heavy, it's going to slow down, and that's what we don't want. We want to keep a nice consistent tempo. On this topic of articulation, we also don't want it to get too pecky and try to be too short. We want to have nice round notes, and that's especially important on the eighth notes in here. We don't want to be too short and stopped. Nice round, I hesitate to say it, but full sounding notes, even though they are separated. After all, staccato does mean separated rather than short. Another thing we want to keep in mind is we want to avoid splatting these low notes. So we want to keep the embouchure engaged, keep the air from getting too strong and blowing out these low notes, letting the pitch drop and the tone go. Tone should always stay nice and compact and focused, and we don't want them to be just kind of tubby and like splatting against the wall. Nice, full, round, warm clarinet sound throughout all the registers, and especially on these lower notes as we go down in the range. We say it a lot in general for music, but you do want to think horizontally and try to create nice long phrases with this one. It's easy to chop this one up into tiny pieces as we learn it, to get the fingers down, to get an idea of what we're doing, but we want to be able to have a nice long musical phrase and have direction. The main idea with this one is we want direction through these phrases as we go down. We don't want to pull back and lose our momentum. We want to drive through these trips down to the low end of the register and back up. We're going to have a lot more success in achieving those high notes at the ends of phrases if we drive through the low notes and use them as kind of a launch pad to get up to the top. So keep in mind, the last thing we talked about though is you want to keep the embouchure engaged and the air not from getting too strong on these low notes. So we're blowing through the phrase, but we're being reasonable rather than kind of just letting the embouchure go and letting the air get fat and too wide. As a final note, we do have a short cadenza in this one. It's just a chromatic scale, but rather than try to zip the whole way through it and think of it as however many notes it is, you want to try and break that up into individual pockets of 3 to 4 notes. That way you'll have an easier time of spreading out and accelerando, if that's what you choose to do, as you get all the way up to the top. It'll also keep your fingers a little bit more under control. If we just try to go as fast as possible right away, it's going to sound like a blur. Like everything else, we want it to be nice and clear. So that about does it for etude number 35. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. As always, like, subscribe, do all the social media things. Check out the Patreon if you are so inclined. And I hope this video was helpful. We'll see you in the next one. If you made it this far, thanks for watching through the entire video. I hope it was helpful. Normally this is where I have a card with links to my Patreon and my Etsy, but I wanted to take a second to give you an idea of what you're going to find at both of those. For my Patreon, there's one level, $5 a month, and that's to help keep these videos coming out. I know lessons can be expensive, and I want this information to be able to be found regardless of your situation, whether you can take lessons or not. The $5 a month also gets you access to a PWE Music Discord server, which if it's not up when you're watching this video, it should be soon. And as of right now, that's just an opportunity to ask me questions, get my thoughts on things, and hopefully as the community grows, you'll be able to get in touch with clarinetists and musicians from around the world. At my Etsy shop, you'll find custom woodworking, and applicable to this are custom reed cases. So, as a woodworker, I enjoy making accessories for musical instruments, and everybody should have a reed case if you don't. And not that you need to have a fancy custom one, but I do offer 3D printed reed cases as well as custom wood cases. So, hopefully you'll check out either one, give some support to the channel, and I'll keep these videos coming.